Grocery inflation has slowed. But the grocery bill did not go back down. That is the part many families feel every week, even when the headline numbers sound better. Inflation can cool, and prices can still be high. The rate of increase can fall, while the total at the checkout line remains painful. For households, this is not an abstract economic distinction. It is the difference between a chart that shows progress and a receipt that still feels too expensive. A family does not experience food inflation as a percentage point. They experience it as fewer items for the same money, a different brand, a smaller package, a skipped restaurant meal, less left over for savings. According to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, food at home prices rose 11.4% in 2022. That was the height of the grocery shock. The increase slowed to 5% in 2023, then 1.2% in 2024. And 2.3% in 2025 for 2026. USDA expects food at-home prices to rise 2.4%, slightly below the 20-year historical average. That is real progress. But it is not a reset. The grocery bill is still building on top of the price increases that already happened. That is why the official story can sound better while daily life still feels strained. In April 2026, the Bureau of Labor Statistics reported that food at home prices rose 0.7% in 1 month. Grocery prices were up 2.9% from a year earlier. 5 of the 6 major grocery store food groups increased. That is not the inflation shock Americans saw in 2022, but for families already dealing with rent, insurance, utilities, debt payments, and transportation costs, it is still another layer of pressure. The headline says grocery inflation slowed. The household feels the price level. Those are not the same thing. A lower inflation rate means the climb is slower. It does not mean the mountain disappeared. Food also has a different place in the budget than many other expenses. A family can postpone a vacation. It can wait on a new appliance. It can delay a furniture purchase. Food cannot be postponed for long. That is why grocery inflation is one of the most visible forms of economic stress in America. It returns every week. It shows up in familiar aisles. It affects people who follow the data and people who never read an inflation report. And even when the national number looks moderate, the grocery basket itself can tell a more uneven story. In April 2026, BLS reported that fruits and vegetables rose 1.8% for the month and 6.1% over the previous year. Produce is not a luxury item for many families. It is part of the ordinary shopping list. Beef moved sharply too. The meats, poultry, fish, and eggs index rose 1.3% in April, while beef rose 2.7% in that month alone. Those are the kinds of prices shoppers notice. A jump in beef or produce can make inflation feel stronger than the overall grocery number suggests. Non-alcoholic beverages added another source of pressure. BLS reported that beverage prices rose 1.1% in April and 5.1% over the year. That includes routine purchases such as coffee, soft drinks, juices, and other drinks households buy again and again. At the same time, not every category was rising. Dairy and related products were up 0.8% in April, but down 0.6% over the year. The category called Other Food at Home fell 0.4% in April. This is why grocery inflation can feel confusing. The average may be moderate. Some items may fall. But if the items a family buys most often are still rising, that family's personal inflation rate can feel much higher than the official number. There is no single American grocery basket. A household with children may buy more milk, fruit, cereal, snacks, meat, and drinks. A retiree may buy a different mix. A working parent may rely more on prepared foods or quick meals. A family with a long commute may feel fuel costs at the same time food costs rise. One inflation report can land very differently from one kitchen table to another. That is where the gap opens between official progress and lived experience. And the pressure does not stop at the grocery store. BLS reported that food away from home rose 3.6% over the year ending April 2026. Full-service meals rose 3.8%. Limited service meals rose 3.2%. Families feel that when they buy fast food, takeout, or a restaurant meal, USDA expects that pattern to continue in 2026. It forecasts overall food prices to rise 2.9%, food away from home prices to rise 3.6%, and food at home prices to rise 2.4%. So even if grocery inflation cools, the broader food budget can still tighten. For many households, the response has already changed daily behavior. The Federal Reserve's 2025 survey of household economic well-being found that 58% of adults said price changes compared with the prior year made their financial situation worse. 14% said price changes made it much worse. The same survey found that 77% of adults took some action in response to higher prices. 62% switched to cheaper products. 60% used less of a product or stopped using it. 46% delayed a major purchase. 41% reduced savings. Those numbers show the pressure beneath the surface. Families are not just noticing prices, they are reorganizing around them. A cheaper brand, a smaller package, fewer meals out. More careful shopping, less money going into savings. That is how inflation becomes a middle-class squeeze. Not always through one dramatic event, but through small decisions repeated over months and years. For lower-income households, the pressure is sharper. The Fed found that 8% of adults said members of their household sometimes or often did not have enough to eat in the prior month. Among adults with income under $25,000, the share was 21%. Among those with income between $25,000 and $50,000, it was 14%. USDA's latest national food security data also shows persistent strain. In 2024, 13.7% of U.S. households, or 18.3 million households, were food insecure at some time during the year. Among households with children, the share was 18.4%, or 6.7 million households. Those figures do not prove food insecurity worsened in 2026. The latest USDA national food security data cited here is for 2024, but they do show that food affordability was already a serious problem before the latest grocery numbers. For families near the edge, even a small increase can matter. A 2 or 3% rise may look manageable in a national report, but if it comes after years of earlier increases, and if the household has little room left, it does not feel small. That is why inflation slowed can sound disconnected from real life. Families are not starting from zero. They are starting from the price level left behind by the last inflation shock. Wages are part of the same story. In April 2026, BLS reported that average hourly earnings rose 0.2%. But real average hourly earnings fell 0.5% from March to April. They were also down 0.3% from April 2025 to April 2026. In plain terms, a paycheck can go up in dollars while buying power goes down. That is one reason households can feel worse even when some broad economic numbers look stable. The paycheck rises. The grocery bill rises, the rent rises, the insurance bill rises, and by the end of the month, there is still less room than before. Economists call this the difference between nominal income and real purchasing power. Most families just know whether the paycheck stretches. For many, it does not stretch as far as it used to. Behind the grocery aisle, supply pressures also make certain prices harder to bring down quickly. Beef is one example. USDA has said a cyclical contraction of the cattle herd has resulted in tight cattle supplies and pushed farm-level cattle prices higher. Farm-level cattle prices were 16.2% higher in March 2026 than in March 2025. That does not mean retail beef prices will keep rising forever. Future prices are uncertain. But it does show that beef inflation is tied to supply conditions deeper in the chain, not just a one-month move at the grocery store. Fresh vegetables are another example. USDA says vegetable prices can swing because of weather, production, seasonality, and other factors. Farm-level fresh vegetable prices were 49% higher in March 2026 than in March 2025. That kind of increase does not automatically pass through one-for-one to shoppers. Retailers, suppliers, and distributors can absorb or manage some of the pressure. But it helps explain why produce can be volatile even when the overall grocery number looks calmer. Producer prices also showed pressure in April 2026. The Producer Price Index for final demand rose 1.4%. Final demand goods rose 2%. Energy rose 7.8%. Final demand foods rose 0.2%. Fresh and dry vegetables rose 13.5% at the producer level. Producer costs do not automatically become consumer prices. Retailers may absorb some increases. Suppliers may renegotiate. Competition can limit how much reaches the shelf. But these costs matter because they show the pressure that can sit behind the final price. Food prices are not shaped by one simple force. They reflect farming conditions, transportation, labor, energy, packaging, processing, wholesale markets, retail competition, and consumer demand. That is why grocery inflation is hard to fix quickly. Some pressure comes from domestic supply, some comes from weather, some comes from fuel and energy costs, some comes from labor and logistics, some comes from how retailers price products when shoppers are watching every dollar. Reuters reported in May 2026 that rising fuel costs pushed bargain-hunting shoppers toward Walmart's lower-priced groceries and essentials. Walmart kept conservative annual targets despite solid results. That says something about the consumer economy. When households feel squeezed, they do not always stop spending. Often they change how they spend. They trade down, they buy store brands, they compare prices more closely. They move toward retailers known for lower prices. They cut back somewhere else. From the outside, the economy may still look active. Stores are open, carts are moving. Sales continue, large retailers may still report solid results. But beneath that activity, families may be stretching, substituting, and saving less. That is the hidden pressure in this story. The crisis phase of grocery inflation has cooled, but the higher price level it left behind is still inside household budgets. That is why many Americans hear that inflation is slowing and feel little relief. They are not comparing this month only with last month. They are comparing today's grocery bill with what they remember paying before prices jumped. By that standard, the damage has not disappeared. A family that changed its habits in 2022 may still be living with those habits in 2026. The cheaper brand may still be in the cart. The restaurant meal may still be skipped. The savings contribution may still be lower. This is what happens when inflation slows before affordability recovers. The official story improves first. The household story takes longer. For policymakers, that creates a difficult message. They can point to lower inflation rates and be right. Food inflation really has slowed from the 2022 peak. USDA data shows that clearly. But families can point to the checkout line and be right too. Prices are still higher. Some categories are still rising. Food is still taking up space in the budget. Both things can be true. That is why this issue matters for the middle class. The middle class squeeze is often discussed in broad terms: housing, healthcare, debt, retirement, insurance, utilities. Groceries make it visible. They turn the economy into something immediate, not an index, not a forecast, not a political argument, a receipt. And that receipt can tell a different story from the headline. The path ahead may be uneven. In a better scenario, grocery inflation keeps cooling. Some volatile categories stabilize. Wage growth improves in real terms. Families slowly regain breathing room, even if prices never return to old levels. In a more difficult scenario, key categories such as beef, produce, beverages, or restaurant meals keep rising faster than the average. Producer costs, fuel costs, or supply disruptions add pressure. Families keep trading down, cutting back, and reducing savings. The more likely path may not feel the same in every aisle. Some categories cool, some items fall, others keep rising. That means the national average may look manageable while many households still feel pressure from the specific items they buy most. A single CPI figure cannot capture every family's experience. It does not show the parent choosing between fresh fruit and cheaper snacks. It does not show the retiree watching the same weekly list cost more. It does not show the worker whose pay rose in dollars while buying power slipped. It does not show the family that still buys groceries but saves less afterward. Food inflation has slowed. That matters, but the price level remains high. That matters just as much. For American families, the question is not only whether inflation is lower than it was at the peak. The question is whether life feels affordable again. For many households, the answer is still complicated. The grocery bill did not create every financial problem facing the middle class, but it is one of the clearest reminders of the pressure. It comes every week. It reaches every household, and it turns a national economic debate into a private calculation at the checkout line. How much farther can this paycheck stretch? That is why grocery inflation can slow, and families can still feel broke, because inflation is measured in percentages. But pressure is measured in choices.